Welcome to Rethinking Youth Ministry, where each week we hope to raise the bar for youth ministry by asking questions, interviewing thinkers, and having real, honest conversations about what it looks like to lead the next generation. I'm CJ, and sitting around the table today, we have Ashley Bohentz.
What's up, everyone?
We have Tom Shefchunas.
How's it going?
Also known as Chef, and we have Louis Lavoie.
Hello, hello.
And before we jump into today's topic, today's question, I just want to remind, maybe someone who's joining us for the first time, who we have sitting around the table. So Ashley, will you just give us a 20, 30-second version of who you are, why you're here, why you're sitting behind this microphone?
Sure thing. I am a middle school public school teacher turned youth pastor and a volunteer turned staff member on a church.
Awesome. All right, Chef.
Again, educator for 10 years, volunteered as a youth worker for 5, and then became a professional Christian, a professional youth worker 12 years ago, and led a multi-campus ministry.
All right. And Louis?
I started working in churches right out of college, worked at 5 different churches, the last one of those being North Point Community Church. Somehow ended up there in the middle school ministry, did that for a couple of years, and now work with all of our North Point partner churches around the country, specifically with the student ministry directors at those churches.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. Today on the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast, we are going to talk about a question that we've all probably asked. I know I've asked, and I've never even been in full-time ministry. I've just been a small group leader, and I've still asked this question. And the question is, how do I not quit? And whether youth workers have been in full-time ministry, part-time ministry, volunteers, like I said, it's something that I think all of us have asked. And that's why I'm so glad that we have you 3 around the table today, because all 3 of you have led ministries and faced this question for sure.
And quit before.
And
Yes.
you've all quit. So great. So my question to you guys, just to get us going, is, do you have a few reasons? Do you know why a lot of youth workers are asking the question, how do I not quit? Like, what are they facing in those moments that's prompting them to ask that?
I think I talk to youth leaders all the time, or youth workers, and I'm amazed at just how much they do, how much weight is on their shoulders, maybe how little time they have to get it all done. It doesn't remind me of my job as a youth worker. It reminds me of my job as a teacher. When I was a teacher and a coach, I was paid so well to be a full-time sub my first year in Pittsburgh as a teacher, and then I got to be the swim coach, and I think my stipend was $500 total, which works out to about 23 cents an hour once you do all the math of all the work that you have to do. And then, jumped into a club coaching because I couldn't afford to do it any other way. So you're working 16 hours a day. You feel the weight of knowing all those kids' names, all those parents, and it's just, it can be an overwhelming thing over time. It's exciting at first, or it was for me, but it wears you down slowly over time.
Yeah, I mean, the shortest answer, I think, is that it's really hard. It's just really hard.
It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
It's really hard to do it in a way
point.
where you see some kind of immediate success or wins. And so when you add the financial strain that sometimes your family is under because you've chosen to do youth ministry, sometimes I think that's where people start weighing out, is this worth it? Are the results I'm seeing and the immediate wins I'm seeing or not seeing, is it worth the financial strain my family?
And so often we don't hear from parents or students unless it's like a negative complaint.
Exactly.
So it's like, how hard you're working as a youth pastor, but then you hear the parent complaining you're not working hard enough, or the student doesn't like the service, and then it's hard because sometimes you feel like, does your leadership know enough about what you're actually doing to defend you? Well,
I think that's a big one too. I think sometimes youth workers will put in hours and hours of planning and pulling off an event that goes 98% great, and then the only thing they hear about when they get back in the office the next day is the one thing that got broken.
You didn't have an EpiPen.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Louis, you mentioned that a lot of youth workers struggle with this because they're not seeing the results they wanted. So what are the results that they're hoping to see?
Well, I think when people a lot of times start thinking about going into student ministry, they are envisioning, obviously, having impact on students' lives, students either giving their lives to Jesus or following him in a very real and tangible way that people can see, and just sometimes you don't see much of that, especially early on.
It's culture change, right? I mean, you do get the salvation moments, but then, you're watching for the sanctification. And often you don't see culture change. You just realize it has. But in the middle, there's just no evidence of it, and you're working
Yeah.
so hard. Emotionally, I was too young really to handle being a teacher well, because one, I expected to change kids' lives, and it just didn't happen the way I had thought it would. And so that was emotionally tough on me. And then what you were talking about, Ashley, the parents, I wasn't emotionally or maybe confident enough in my own skin, because they come and it's somewhat accusational that, you're here to ruin their kid's life. It's like, yeah, that's why I'm making $22,000 a year, because I want to ruin kids' lives.
Especially as a youth pastor, because, as an educator, it's about what you're teaching them, and it's like a subject or content. And then when they come to you as a youth pastor, you're like so personal. It's like the spiritual level. It's like,
Right.
oh,
Well,
that
as a teacher, you've got grades to prove that, my
Right.
kids are
Exactly.
progressing.
That's a good
it's just
point.
Like, and it reminds me of what quote Reggie Joyner said, that, sometimes we don't see growth, we don't see spiritual growth because it's spiritual.
Yeah.
And and I think that's the hard part. Even as a small group leader, we're told, I'm a small group leader for middle school guys, and we're told when we're leading sixth graders that, hey, just wait, because by 8th grade year, it's all going to be different. And it is to an extent, but sometimes I think it sets us up for failure, because as a small group leader, during 8th grade year, you're expecting to see all these spiritual transformations
Right.
that we've been told about.
Right.
Like all these, like just keep holding on until 8th grade year. And sometimes it's discouraging because it's just not as obvious as we would hope. And that's where, even just from my position, showing up at church once a week as a small group leader, I'm tempted in those moments to ask that question: how do I not quit? Because
Right.
I've been waiting for this, and it's just not quite what I was hoping.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, another problem too is when the results that you're wanting sometimes feel like they don't line up with the results that your boss or the person you report to is wanting. I know my first job at a student ministry, amazing things, or I would see great signs at our weekly event of students taking steps in their faith. But the only question I was ever asked the next day is how many people were there. That's, you know what I'm saying? So that's
the
Wow.
number question.
I mean, nobody ever asked anything about any personal growth in anybody's life. It was just how many were there.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think another thing that some student pastors might be feeling is, watching other people get promoted around you or move to different positions or get raises or get, public attention for something, and wondering, like, does anybody care what I want for my future? Does anybody care what I want next?
No,
tough.
that's a big part of it, is that in most cases, you do get a raise if you quit doing youth ministry. I mean,
That's a good point.
that's always
Really
a
good
temptation there of, I love student ministry, but if I just move into this other role at my church, then I get a raise.
An adult job.
Yes.
Right.
So we've talked about some of the tensions that a lot of youth workers might be feeling. I would love to poke just a little bit more, since you guys have been working in ministry for so long. Like, does anybody remember a moment where there was just like the moment where you just really remember wrestling with this question: how do I not quit? Maybe on Monday morning when you got to the church, or after a Sunday night or Wednesday night event went haywire or whatever, just like, how do I not just walk out of here and never look back?
Yeah, I know. I don't really have one big thing where I thought I was going to quit. I never really thought about quitting like next day or anything like that. But I've had many times where I just started fantasizing about if something else comes along, I will probably jump.
Yeah.
And that was due to all kinds of different things, from not feeling like I had respect and trust from my boss, and not feeling like I had the freedom to do what I thought was right in our ministry, from times where I struggled with feeling like I didn't have the respect of my friends that worked outside the church, and they had, quote, real jobs, and I was the guy that's in my late 20s or 30s still doing youth ministry in their eyes. Like, what are you
that's
doing?
real.
You're just
Yeah.
going to do this forever? I mean, really, is this what your life is? And so I've struggled with that.
What do you do when it's not Sunday?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what do you do all week? Those kinds of things. And so I've had to, weigh those things. And obviously, I have worked at 5 different churches. I have worked in several different roles. I have moved in and out of student ministry into adult roles, and then back into student ministry roles, and then out of local church roles into either multi-campus or working with churches around the country. So I feel like I have navigated this a lot. So this isn't something I'm talking about that other people feel.
So did you just like learn to accept the one about the friends, poking at, when are you going to get a real job? That kind of stuck out to me. Like, do you just like come to terms with that? Like, okay, I'm just going to get made fun of, or how do you wrestle with that? Or you just come to peace with it?
For me, I don't know about you guys, but for me, it's just seasons. There are seasons when I'm locked in and I'm like, no, what I'm doing matters, and it matters more than the bonuses you get at the end of the year for hitting your sales goals.
Yeah.
and I see fruit, and I remind myself that, the impact that is happening in people's lives is going to be residual for decades in their lives and their kids' lives and things like that. And there's other times when I don't feel that way. And I'm wondering, is it time to hang up the cleats and go find something else?
Yeah.
So.
I am a very passionate person, so there have been many, many countless times that I've just wanted to quit right now. In every single job that I've been a part of, I've had thoughts of I want to quit. But a wise person once told me that I should never make that decision when I'm emotional. So I've never actually done it the day of or the day after.
So you can never make a decision?
No, I am very good at making decisions, Chef.
Okay.
In fact, let me tell you about that. When I left my teaching job, I was a middle school health teacher in a public school for 6 years. And, growing up, that's what I always wanted to do. So if you're listening and you're like, how do I quit something I've always wanted to do? This was my story. I never pictured working in a church. I never knew it was an option for me as a woman because I never saw a woman do it. But I wanted to be a school teacher my whole life. Never played baby, Barbie, wedding, house. I played teacher, gave my neighbors homework, got mad when they didn't do it because I wanted to grade it. Different story. And so when I was volunteering in the youth ministry and they came to me and they were like, hey, you should take this job. I was like, no way. Like, I am doing what I've always thought I would be doing. I don't want to quit it. I love it. And it took literally the position was open for over a year, and I was helping run the ministry, but I wouldn't leave my job because I didn't want to quit it, And I wrestled with God about that decision. It was like literally the hardest decision I've ever had to make and the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge was, as I was just talking with God about it, him saying to me, I'm asking you to leave what you love because it's harder than leaving what you don't love, and it requires more faith. Are you surprised? And I was like, ugh.
Could you say that again? I don't want to drive by that because that was
moments.
Real.
Oh, that moment. I remember it. God said to me, I'm asking you to leave what you love because it's harder than leaving what you don't love, and it requires more faith. Are you surprised? And that was just one example of a time where I chose to, I hate use the word quit because it hurts my pride when I use that word, but
I don't think you did. You went on to the next thing.
I went on to the next thing.
Right.
And even like when I was in youth ministry, I was youth pastor up in Maryland for 4 years. I was their middle school pastor. And before I moved down to Atlanta to join the staff with Chef, it was so hard. Again, it was like over a year and a half
those are your babies and your kids.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It was so personal. I poured everything, all of my time, all my energy, all 20 extra pounds I gained during those years into those kids and those families in that community. And I was like, I don't know if this is the right thing or not. And it took a long time for me to make that decision. And it wasn't an emotional decision at that point, although there were a lot of emotions attached to the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got an offer to leave my teaching job. I was a principal, high school principal. I got an offer to come to North Point. Reggie had offered me to come to be part of middle school. And I'm sitting there and I'm stuck in a job I love, or I thought I loved at the time. And then I'm thinking, how do I not work for this, vision-oriented organization? And, how do I not work for this place? And so in a conversation, Reggie let me off the hook. He said, if you don't feel done, you need to stay. And then he let me off the hook even more. He said, and when you're ready, let me know. So I was like, well, I don't feel done. It was this clarity.
We call that the Reggie Woo factor.
He is so good at that. But a year later, to the day, I called him and said, I am so done, and so, I came to work with Transit, which is our middle school ministry at North Point. And it wasn't called Transit at the time, though. Extreme with an X. That's right. And so
cool.
Yeah, we got rid of that. That's one of my first moves when I could get to do that. But really, it's been in the last 3 years that I learned something new because I just left. I just left North Point, and I'm sitting there
because you were so sad that I left.
Right,
you had to follow me.
That is not what was happening. But, you know, I mean, it was really hard on me because I'm sitting there thinking, and, you know, I fell into that job by knowing the right people, being at the right time, you know, and I've always felt just blessed to have it. And when I look around and talk to my friends, I think this might be the greatest student ministry job in the country, from a resourcing and a belief from our leadership and an expectation of time and that we're supposed to put our families first. I mean, it was ridiculous when it comes to that sort of stuff. And yet in my heart, there was a discontent. And it was like, what is this? You are so ungrateful. You know, it was this thing. And I finally got to the point where I just couldn't figure it out. I wondered if it was burnout. And then I wondered if it was a midlife crisis. You know, I'm 42 years old going, what is this thing? And then I wondered, you know, and I started to try to blame the system. And then I'm like, well, the problems are problems. You know, leaders solve problems. And when you solve a problem, guess what you get? A new problem. You know, it's just like, it wasn't that. And I tried to blame people for a season, but I was just trying to understand what it was. And over about 2 to 3 years of talking to people I trust, I realized I'm done. Like, I'm done with what God asked me to do here. And he's given me this discontent to look towards something else. And so that gave me permission, really. Look, I call it the golden handcuffs of North Point, because it's such a great job.
Yeah.
How do you leave it? And then you finally get to the point where it's like, if you know you're done, then it frees you up to look. And I didn't know where I was going to go. But so that was a really hard thing to go tell my boss. I'm going to go, you know, by August. And so I don't know if you have any problems you'd love me to solve, but I also have to look outside the organization. And then I called Reggie, and you know, he's like, well, and then, so, you know, we can talk about the student thing at another time, but I'm just so excited to be here. But it was a new challenge. It was being called to something, but I had to leave something different. So that's a little bit different than the question.
Well, Actually, you said something I want to go back to, because I think it's really important for our listeners to hear that again. Because I think one of the reasons that we think about quitting is because there's problem after problem after problem after problem. And so what you just said about problems is important. Can you repeat that?
Oh, that with leadership? I mean, leaders solve problems. I think this is a Bill Hybels quote, or a roughly translated Bill Hybels quote. And the prize for solving a problem is a new problem. And usually a harder one if you do it well. But if you're solving the same problems all the time, I think this is also a Bill quote, isn't it? Then you're not leading. Is that? Is that the? So, you know, I just think that's important for folks, because the discontent came even in the midst of a really good job. And so, you know, is it discontent? Is it, you know, how do I know? Is this discontent? Am I being called to a new thing, or am I just frustrated and I'm in a tired season, which I think you were alluding to? Sure. Those tired seasons are really, like February. I should never make a decision in February. I need sunlight. I need, you know, to get outside. Yeah. And I need a vacation in February. That's the only decision I need to make, is where am I going to go where there is sun and sand.
So you guys talked through how you've come to terms with answering the question, how do I not quit? And, you know, I guess sometimes it sounds like it's a lot of evaluating the situation. Is it burnout? Is it tiredness? Is it a crisis? Is it a systems issue? What's causing me to ask the question, how do I not quit? Now, I want to poke just a little bit further. So what would you, because you guys have been sharing how you processed, you know, that question. Right. What would you tell a youth worker to do? The worker is laying in bed at night after a terrible event, and they're just staring at the ceiling, and they're just in that low point. Like, and they're just like, how do I show up again tomorrow? Like, what do you tell the youth worker in that situation who is right there on the edge, and they're like, all right, one last ditch effort, typed, you know, youth ministry into iTunes, and now they're here. What do you tell that person that's listening?
I think I would tell them sometimes you need to quit some things in order to not quit the thing you really want to be doing. I think I was really inspired by Bob Goff, who always says he quit something on Thursday.
I know. I love
Every
that.
Thursday he quit something, whatever it is, whether it's quit doing something or quit looking for something that you can't find.
I think that's great. And just because you're leaving a job doesn't mean you're leaving the ministry. And so sometimes I think it's a bad question. Sometimes you should quit. So I almost go to the 3 hurts that we talk to small group leaders about. Like, you know, what are the things that are happening that I have to go tell mom and dad about? Well, I mean, if you're doing something wrong or being asked to do something wrong that crosses your integrity and they don't care, get out of there. Like, I had a friend, he was getting bonuses for how many baptisms he got. I mean, that is, I mean, I doubt, I mean,
So sorry if that's you.
I'm not saying the pastor was evil. My guess is he just poorly applied a business, statistic and goal to, and you're putting pressure on. I mean, that I don't even want to get into how that felt, and he was like, I just couldn't do that. I'm like, you shouldn't do that. That's a good reason. I think if you're being abused, you can be mentally abused. You can be abused on the expectation. I mean, that at some point you have to be realistic about this. Is at the end of the day, this is not just expectation. This is abuse, and that they don't care about my well-being, and you should get out of there because there are other places to go, and you're talented, and go find that.
And this sounds simple, but I would advise that person to seek community with other student pastors, and even maybe seek someone further along than them to mentor them, because those people and that person would probably tell them about the 20 events they've done throughout their career that did not go well, and yet they still had years of fruitful ministry after that.
Which means if you're not feeling that yet, go get a mentor and make sure, if you don't have somebody who does your job that you are close to, we just need to help get people connected, show up to Orange Conference. And that's one thing we do is we try to get people connected, and you need a safe person that doesn't work at your church, that you don't report to, because these are real things that need to be, I mean, when they're on the inside, they're just going to grow.
Well, it's like our personal lives as well. All we see as student ministry is other people's highlight reel. We follow their social media. Yeah. We say that one clip of how cool their event went, or that attendance number they posted, or something like that, and we don't see all the things where things did not go well, or what they had to answer to their boss about at their event the next day, and all this. So we feel alone in that. Where if we have community with other people in youth ministry, we get both sides. We get the real side of the story too. So we don't feel like we're the failures and everybody else is out there killing it all the time. And so I think that just helps us have perspective that helps us to endure in this area.
Right. So let me ask in a little bit different way, and it might be the same answer, Louis, and this is open to all three of you. So what about the youth worker who's like, well, I'm not being abused, I'm not being paid for baptisms, I'm not whatever, I'm just at the end of my rope, and I just don't know what to do now. What about that person?
I would say find out what it is that fills you, that is like an outlet for you outside of your job. Because if you're not using all the gifts and passions that you have, it's easy to be emptied in your role as a youth pastor. Right. And so for me, that looks like in the job that I'm sitting in right now, I get to create content for a living, which I love, and the people I work with are so fun. But I need to be around student pastors sometimes just to hear what's going on. It fills me. It reminds me why I'm doing what I'm doing. Right. I also need to be around middle school students, and I don't get to do that often. But I do get to teach on Sundays in the middle school ministry at North Point still, and I also get to lead middle school mission trips. So that fills me. And the third thing is mission trips. I love traveling. I love going and seeing what God's doing in the world. It inspires me. So if I don't have those three pieces part of my routine, I'll get burnt out in this seat.
Right. And I think one term I've heard in the business world is protect the asset. Well, the asset is your mind and your heart.
Oh, that's so true.
Protect the asset. Like if you are working 90 hours a week, your heart and mind are not working at their full potential. And you have got to sleep, you have got to exercise, you have got to do something you love that fills you up. And so if you're overwhelmed right now and you're just overwhelmed because of your calendar, stop doing something. Mm-hmm. You will be surprised at how much more you'll get done if you fill up just a bit in those late hours. And, if you think the God of the universe needs more than 45 to 55, 60 hours of your time to change the world, then the God of the universe is not big enough for you.
Wow. Yeah.
What is it for you that fills you up, Chef?
Me?
Yeah.
I need time with my kids. I need alone time in the morning. I have to get up and just sit there with a book open and see what comes to me and unload. I have to unload what's in my mind, or I just start getting more anxious and more frustrated with myself.
Yeah.
If I get a choice, I grab CJ and we're going to drive north and go fishing. Standing in a river, or we have a beautiful backyard and we chose it on purpose because I can sit and look at the trees, and it's just important to me. So those are different ways.
It's good.
I fill up. How about you, Louis?
Yeah, I fill up I'm a social
Friends.
person, so
I was gonna
just
say.
hanging out with friends, whatever that looks like. If that's, finding a cool restaurant to try out, or just hanging out around a campfire in somebody's backyard. Making sure I have those outlets of community is where I run to. So, yeah, those are the things that recharge me. I think that sometimes people get to that point though because they got into student ministry for a reason, and then they find out very quickly that that's not what it really is. That there's all kinds of other things that come along with that job. And so, just like you were saying, find things that give you life. I think you've also, like you're talking about quitting things. I think that's so important. Once you experience the reality of what is required by your job, finding out how you can bring other people along and hand off the things in your job that drain you, and frankly, that somebody else is probably a lot better than you at doing, and don't walk away entirely from the things that do give you life. Like I've seen guys that they are really good at speaking, or they are really good at hosting, or they are really good at being a character at camp. Chef. Yeah. Even though he was running the entire thing from a multi-campus standpoint, being a character at camp was one of the things that he loved, enjoyed. So he would love it when he was scheduled for that thing, or schedule himself for that thing. So sometimes if hosting or speaking or whatever it is, or being with leaders is what brings you life, hand off some other things that drain you in your ministry, and make sure you have that outlet in the ministry to do the things that is the whole reason why you got into student ministry in the first place.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So this has been great so far. We're going to take it one more direction here. So what about the youth worker who's asking, how do I not quit? And they're not being abused. Again, they're not getting paid for baptisms. They are filling up appropriately and all of that kind of a thing. But there's still that thing that's just like, I don't know what to do. How do I not quit? What about that person?
So they're wondering if maybe they're going to be called to the next thing. They're wondering.
Right.
If
They're
that's
not
the
just
case.
tired, or they're not just
Right.
not filling up or not in community.
Right. I think calling. I didn't have a direct call. I just followed the opportunities that were presented to me. And so if there's an opportunity, or a probable opportunity, as I felt like, I knew I could call up here, and I wondered. I had a pretty good idea that there'd be an opportunity. So, do you have an opportunity somewhere else? Or are you pretty sure you'd have an opportunity somewhere else? Can be a calling. Sometimes it's just something where if you can get yourself to the place where you'd rather try and fail than stay here and do great. Like, that's a moment of clarity. I heard from a friend of mine one time. He's like, I just have to go to Denver to start this church. I'd rather try and fail than wonder the rest of my life if it would have worked. I mean, that's clarity, I think.
You mentioned calling. I think that is an interesting thing that probably a lot of the listeners are dealing with, because my story is a little bit different from you guys, where you guys were in teaching in schools, and then an opportunity to do ministry came up and you jumped at it, and it was great. I had an experience where when I was in college, I was going a different direction and felt a calling into ministry in college, and made that public to my home church, and then started working at churches. So then when you get into those, jobs 1, 2, 3, 4, and you feeling like you want to quit, you're also wrestling with this fact, but was I called into ministry? What does that even mean? Was that even real? Those kinds of things. So I think we probably have some listeners that are wondering that same exact thing.
Right.
There's a lot of things that I don't remember, but I really, really remember every single time there was a transition in my life from one job to the next, and the painful process of going through that. And I would encourage any listener who's in that season to really spend time getting to know yourself and what it is you're looking for in that season. Like, is it something you're trying to look for that you'll never get from a job, or you're never going to get from a person?
Right.
Or is it like something else you want to experience and the next step for you? I know that I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but I was, because every time I made that decision, it was like a year-long process of trying to figure it out. And then I also want to say, it feels way better to leave a job when things are going okay.
It really does.
And you can look back at it as a great season. So it's okay to leave something you love. And it's just going to be the hardest thing you ever do.
It's tough. Hey, I've got one other thing. I'm not sure that it fits, but as we were thinking about this, I'm like, I've just got this quote, and I've used it a couple times with friends, and I'm about to swear. So if you're offended by that,
Okay.
so are you ready? Everybody ready?
We're bracing
Baptists?
ourselves here.
Right. I mean,
Louis, CJ, and I all have one in our head too.
right. I'm going back to my Sunday school classes where we used to just talk. Is this a swear word?
So is
or
this where the
not?
podcast goes from the little C next to it to just an
Rated
E?
R.
It's an explicit youth
Right.
podcast. So
This is going to be the first youth ministry podcast.
This is a lot of
with
buildup.
an E.
This better be a
This is-
good.
You better
curse word.
use a good word.
it's really not that good, and probably maybe not a swear. But so I often say that the best leaders I know have a go to hell attitude about their job. Not that it's that they feel that way about their church, but that they're called to something. And that they're defined by what they're called to, not by their job title. And so,
Could you say that one more time?
Yes.
I'm going to write that down.
Yes, you are called to. I don't know what did I just say.
Called to your
something.
You are called to something, not your job title. Your job title is just, it's part of what you do, but you can do that ministry or what you're called to outside of that, or for somebody else, or all those sorts of things. And so, when those moments come, that are truly those defining moments of, I'm called to do something and it's not possible here.
yeah.
Then I wouldn't just walk away, try to change it, knowing they might not change.
Right.
But be fearless and say, hey, this is what I believe we need to do. I'm coaching a young lead pastor right now, and he's in the middle of this. And he's just got to have they might let me go, but
Right.
I'm going to go do what I'm going to do. But be sure, don't make a straw man out of the organization and make them an enemy so you feel better about walking away. Be clear.
That's so important.
Be concise. Be professional. Take time and prepare and say clearly, this is what I feel like needs to be done here. And I feel it so strongly. And if you're not willing to do it, that's okay. But
Right.
I'm going to need to go.
And here's the thing, we can only care about so many things in life, so we really need to choose them wisely.
Yeah. Or you're going to look up and think, well, my friend who went to Denver, like the rest of my life, I would have wondered,
Yeah.
would it have worked? It worked. But, he's doing great. It's different than what he thought it would be. But I can't think of anything that's not.
Mm-hmm. So we're asking the question, how do I not quit? And the answer to that question is just, there's no simple 2-word
Right.
answer. There's just a whole lot that goes
It's
into
not
it.
a good question.
Yeah, it's
in
not a
some
good
way.
question.
Right.
There's a whole lot of other questions that will help you evaluate what's really going on and help you figure out, am I just tired? Is there a situation here that's not healthy that I need to walk away from? Or maybe, to Chef's point just there, maybe I need to leave, and it's not the organization's fault. It's just, hey, I'm called to something, and that's not this job title here.
Right.
So for the youth worker who wants to keep diving into this, what would you suggest their next steps be?
I think one thing we haven't touched on is sometimes there is a part of it we need to own. That sometimes we may feel like, this isn't going well, or my church this, or my boss that, or my leaders this, or the parents in my ministry that. And sometimes some of the hardships we're facing and the struggles we're facing are that we have, created some habits that aren't healthy, or that we have some leadership style that is making it difficult for other people to follow us. So I think included in all this has to be a very honest look in the mirror and go, how am I contributing to the situation that I don't enjoy? Sometimes, sometimes it was all a bad hand that you were dealt, but most of the time there is something that we did or are doing to contribute to situations. So I would just say, take a look in the mirror and own. If you own your role in it, I think that will help you make a better decision of whether you need to move on to the next thing or just improve your own leadership, find your own community, and keep trucking, improving where you are.
For me, I did a 360. You can do this for free by sending it to people and saying, I promise I'm safe. I'm trying to figure out what it's like to be on the other side of me, give them some questions. For me, I paid a little money and had a leadership coach walk me through the Right Path 360, which is a pretty intense test.
Yeah.
And, it hurt, but it was good to know what people felt you were good at. It was affirming in some of the things. It affirmed a lot of the things I was feeling. So that was important.
And before we move on to Ashley's point, if you would like to check out that Right Path 360 thing, we'll have a link in our show notes to that. So Ashley, what do you have?
I would just say figure out what it is you really want to be doing. So in this season of wrestling with, do I want to quit? Do I want to stay? What am I supposed to do? Figure out what it is you want to actually do and then do that. Because youth ministry is way too hard to do if it's not what you really want to be doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, guys, this has been a really great conversation. I appreciate you guys getting a little personal with some of the things that even you have faced in your time in ministry. Thank you for joining us for the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Your review helps us make this podcast better. And if you want to dive deeper into what we talked about today and to check out our show notes and links to the resources we mentioned throughout this episode, you can visit our website, rethinkingym.org. That's also a great place to send a friend who might need to hear this episode if they're kind of facing this themselves. So rethinkingym.org. Until next time, I'm CJ.
I'm Ashley.
I'm Chef.
I'm Louie.
And thank you for listening.